Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to The Caring View. If you haven't already subscribed, please do head over and find the bell somewhere on your screen and hit subscribe. Before we begin, just want to remind everybody that views tonight are that of our own and not of any respective employers. Just a shout out to our sponsors that make the show possible. So we first have Prosperwell, the UK's leading digital marketing agency. We have got CBAT, a leading healthcare training provider covering the whole of the United Kingdom. We've got Care Show London, and there's a link there. If you haven't got your tickets, Care Show London is next week. So do make sure that you go and get your tickets and attend. It's across 2 days next week, and it will be a really good couple of days. And a lot of buzz about it, which is good. And we'll touch on that in a minute with both of you. And our newest sponsor, Attis Care by Attis Insurance. So comprehensive care coverage, protecting risk management and how you can support your business. So tonight we're talking all things reablement, and I'm joined by Derek and Lynn. Good evening, both of you.
Evening.
Hi, yeah.
Thank you very much for joining. So just wondering if you could give us a brief introduction. Derek, I know you've been on the show before, so if we start with you, who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me back. I think this is my third time now, so I'm like an old hand at it by now. So my name's Derek Slater, and I am the CEO and founder of Sunday Care Therapy. We are a CQC registered home care provider, but we have a little twist, a little different. So we're founded and run by occupational therapists. So lots of experience when it comes to therapy-led care and reablement, and a bit of a passion of mine.
Thank you very much. And Lynn.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I run a company called Care First, and a bit like Derek, I've got a slight slant to my company because I've got a psychologist who works with my clients, and we do a lot of reablement, bridging and complex care as well. So that's our kind of background, and absolutely passionate about getting things right and the need for early intervention and really good in re-enablement to make sure people live well for as long as we can possibly manage for them too.
No, absolutely. So one thing I want to explore is around the therapy and those specialists that we employ in reablement. I suppose, firstly, I'll come to each of you because our view on reablement might be slightly different. So what is reablement to you? Derek, I'll come back to you.
Oh, straight to me. Okay. Well, I'm going to flip the question on both of you, because reablement, it's an old term, but came into focus in 2010-ish. I think it was Sai who introduced it as a new concept. But we also talk about enablement. So anytime I do any presentations around reablement, I always ask the question, do you know the difference between reablement and enablement? And you'd be so surprised how many times I'm in front of commissioners who are in charge of these kind of things and look at me blank-faced going, what is the difference?
Go on, do tell us the difference, because it's really interesting, because I used to oversee Hertfordshire, and that was Hertfordshire enablement. And I'm now a regional business manager for Essex Cares, and that is reablement. So I am really keen to understand the difference there.
Lynn, do you want to hazard a guess? Any guesses of what it might be?
So for me, reablement is when somebody comes out and we assist them to get back skills they've lost for a hospital stay or whatever it may be, try and get them back on back doing things they couldn't previously do. So for instance, physio exercises to enable them to use, limbs if they've had a problem with that. Enablement, I think, is early intervention to make sure that somebody can carry on living well for as long as they can. So enablement is quite a different thing, really, in my mind.
So enablement is like the whole umbrella term. So all the interventions that we're doing. So we always talk about how our carers are care partners because we do things with you rather than for you. And we enable people to do the things that they want to be able to do but can't do because of injury and illness. So like a general OT kind of thing. So that's what enablement is. And we should all be practicing it, making sure that when we're going out, we're not just doing things for people, we're engaging them in the activities. But exactly what you were saying, Lynn, reablement is that straight out of hospital, get those skills back. So that's where the slight difference is.
Every day is a school day. We always say we learn something new every day. So, no, thank you very much for that, Derek. You spoke there around that ethos of doing with as opposed to doing for. Are there any other core principles that either of you make sure you incorporate into your services?
I think your care planning is vital to work out exactly what clients can and feel comfortable to do. So very often, I'll give you an example. We did a massive project on the Isle of Wight. We had lots of clients that came out on that project with a 6-week care package that had been told in the hospital that they'd be released with a care package. They didn't need a care package. They were just told they were going to be released with a care package. So when we went along to meet these people, they were like, oh, yep, I'll have the care package, blah, blah, blah. But tomorrow I'm going out to have my hair done. And then I'm meeting the girls for lunch. So actually, do you need a care package? You could go back to pathway zero quite easily. I think sometimes the people are misinformed about why they need a care package. And a lot of older people are kept in hospital when they're probably, if you've laid on a trolley for 12 hours and then you're assessed at that point, you're probably tired, worn out, poorly at that point. And once they've been on a ward and got a bit better and come home, they present very differently. So I think care planning is vital to any re-enablement and any activity around that. And when you do that, care assessment is vital to that, because quite often when the assessors go in the hospitals, they'll go when they're quite poorly and they might not be released for a few, maybe a week or so. By that time, they've much improved. So I think the care planning and what we actually get in terms of a client is quite important.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Derek?
Yeah, and so interesting because we've done reablement projects before. And when you get the care plans coming out of hospital, it's so different to how the person actually presents. So we've had people coming out on packages of care, four calls a day, double-handed, and within 2 days, we're down to 1 call, 1 person. It's so crazy, the difference. But
it can go really up. It can go up. They've assessed them and they've got much worse.
Yeah, so a lot of it's got to do with fear of risk. So when people are being discharged, OTs, physios, they don't want to take a risk of that person coming back into hospital, so they overprescribe care. And there's a danger to care being overprescribed. There's cases that I've worked on where overprescribed care, person left in bed for like over a year, go out to see them, they've got all these contractures because nobody's gone out and reviewed, and because it was overprescribed at the beginning, and we don't have the resources or manpower to go out and review all of these cases. So there's a huge responsibility when it comes to discharge to assess and reablement, that we have to get this right, because if we don't, we're going to have people who become dependent on care that in the initial stages really shouldn't have had it. And I'm sure you agree with me, Lynn, a lot of it has got to do with social integration as well. So when we talk to our staff, our care partners, we're saying, you're not just going out there doing a task, you're going out there and you're being their physiotherapist because you're getting them to do exercises. You're being their occupational therapist because you're engaging them in occupations that they want to be able to do, like washing and dressing. But you're also their psychologist because you're the only person who's going to be listening to what their problems are during that day. You're their personal trainer. There's so many roles that our care partners have and all our carers have that we just don't really acknowledge, and we don't give them the skills that they require to be able to do these really complex cases.
Yeah, I mean, we've one of the key things for us when we do re-enablement is we put in clinical review day 3, day 5 and day 7, because we're a nurse-led service. And that makes a massive difference when you feedback clinically on how the care's going and whether it needs to go up or down and the reasons why. And I also think that the other great thing that I've found with all of our care professionals that do re-enablement, their skill to adjust their tone, how they present in front of each client is quite amazing. The way they can motivate people in different ways in between two calls, I think is an outstanding talent that is much undervalued, really, with the re-enablement. There's a certain way of, and I said that's why we said we did lots of training around it. There's a certain way of encouraging people to do tasks and listening very carefully when they can't do them and working out why they can't do them and seeing if there's a way around it. Because sometimes people just can't. It might be they've had a bad night's sleep, they can't get up. It might be a one-off, but it's about adjusting that care to make sure that we assist them to do as much as they can for themselves.
Sounds like you're an occupational therapist at heart, Lynn.
I'm not an OT. Yeah, I'm not a nurse either, but yeah, I've been in care a long time, an awful long time.
You've both touched on some really good points there around care planning that I want to break down. So traditional care plans are around what the person wants to achieve. And I think with Reablement, it's really around those setting of goals and having really clearly defined objectives and outcomes that the person wants to achieve. And we spoke at the beginning around the importance of having therapists and specialists. How important are they in that goal setting kind of person-centered approach there?
I think they're vital. I think it's absolutely vital that we write realistic achievements with clients, working with clients about what they want to achieve. I mean, I'm sure with OTs, it must be an amazing service, but we've got lots of clients where we've had re-enablement projects where we've had our psychologists go out to them to talk them around some of the concerns they've got about being independent and being, it's just not about re-enablement. It's about what happens when that re-enablement ends and what can you direct them to in the community that will help them going forward if they go back to pathway zero. So if they've been in hospital, had a big operation, they come out, but they're quite worried about the carers going because they're going to be quite lonely, which isn't anything new. So I think part of our duty as re-enablement teams, if the care doesn't carry on, is to make sure that they've got some plan going forward. And I think that's key to re-enablement. Otherwise, if you don't intervene and loneliness is a big issue for a lot of the clients, older clients we work with. So if we can try and otherwise they tend to just spiral, become ill, go back into hospital. And then we've got a cycle that we see regularly. They don't look after themselves, they decline, they might be a private payer. There's quite a lot of other stuff mixed up in that, Derek, isn't there, as far as I'm concerned?
Oh my God, completely. So complicated. But going back to the original question about how important is it to have therapists and qualified staff working in a Reablement project, I think if you were to go, just looking at London, if you were to go and take some statistics across the board, you would see how vital it is to have therapists at the front line in these kind of roles. So I've worked in boroughs where the Reablement team literally just consists of one occupational therapist who, because of the nature of their role, they're in a management role, don't get out to be able to do assessments. And as a result, it has a massive impact on the kind of clients that they can accept on Reablement. So in those boroughs where they're not really therapy-led, the Reablement projects are considerably smaller and it has a massive impact on long-term care. But then if you compare it to other boroughs in London where they have full teams, like practically virtual wards, physios, OTs, nurses, access to doctors, access to pharmacists, huge difference. Even if you're just looking at it from a statistic perspective and the money saved, investing in your frontline services with appropriate care, appropriate professionals is going to have a massive impact on your long-term care. I'm sure we've both seen recently, I think it was in the latest publication of, what's it called? I got it down, the Home Care magazine. And there's an article where it's talking about how the NHS England did studies and it's showing that 95% of care costs are being spent on 5% of our client groups. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that figure, I was like, that is bananas. So if we're not getting it right at the front line, we're going to have a massive impact. We're talking about how there's social care crisis. I've been working in social care for nearly 20 years now. And since I started working in it,
We've
I've heard
always been in
social
crisis.
care crisis, and nothing is changing. It's just getting worse and worse. And it's services like what Lynn is providing and what Sunday Care Therapy is providing. These are the changes that need to be made. We need to have these therapists at the front line, ensuring that the care is right-sized as and when required. We need them to be on the discharge to assess pathways, and we need them to also shape the way that services are being run. So Lynn, you're talking about Pathway Zero. What that means is when discharge to assess first came out, they looked at different pathways and having people on a different score. So whether they don't need any intervention or do they need to go into a nursing home. And that was a great way to shape how things were being done. But it's completely changed now. They've stripped it completely back, and they've given all the power back to local authorities. And local authorities then hand it to commissioning, and commissioning don't have the clinical expertise to be able to decide how they're supposed to use this money. So that's why we have such massive varieties, even across London, between how services are run. And it has a massive impact on how care is being delivered. And realistically, at the end of the day, it is our carers on the front line who are delivering the services. I might have clients that I go out and see, and I will see them maybe once a week at most. Well, they'll be seen by their care partners 3 or 4 times a day. So who's going to have a better impact? And the care partners can only be as good as the care plans and the interventions that are being prescribed to them. So it's vitally important that we get this right at the right stages.
Yeah, I've just pulled up some facts and figures from the project we did on the Isle of Wight. And to give you an idea, we returned the average for that area for people to return to Pathway Zero was 3% after discharge from hospital. When we did that project, it was 14%. We saved, to be a bit of a geek here, 2,894 days, bed days.
Wow.
On an average of 440 a day. That's the NHS average, Department of Health average for a bed. Last time I looked, it might be a bit more, a bit less, but that's an average bed. That's without any of the other interventions or any of the other stuff going on. So we worked out that actually having a really good re-enablement service saved the trust and the LA something like 2/3 of what it would cost to keep the person in hospital. So it's a false economy not to invest in these services and not to have the clinical oversight on them, because the clinical oversight, the trusted person, the clinical professional in the field, whether it be an AHP, whether it be a nurse, whether it be a psychologist, they can give clinical opinion on clients' needs and become almost like a trusted assessor, D2 assess, out in the field. And that's not being used enough. And there's so many really skilled care providers out there that just aren't being utilised in a way that would give better outcomes for clients. People are just staying in beds for far too long in hospitals, and then they lose their ability, don't they?
And I think it's that approach. And obviously, I oversee reablement services on behalf of local authorities, and it is that training of your staff into that different mindset. What Derek said earlier, actually, you've got to do it with the person and not for. And I think there are a number of care providers out there where, and I've worked for them, so, and I'm sure we're all aware of them, where actually you want to keep people in your service for longer, because actually then you're making that income, you've got that stability of your company and the profit margins. And I think the joy of what you were saying there, Lynn, of having a dedicated reablement service is actually you get that throughput. The onus isn't on keeping people in the service for longer. Actually, your focus is on putting in that care delivery, the equipment the person needs, what you spoke about earlier around signposting people to those community services, with the aim of actually moving them on from your service as soon as they're ready to leave. And obviously most reablement services is up to 6 weeks. We obviously hear the whole 6 weeks care. And I think we see that a lot in kind of the media and what's spoken about by local and national government, but the up to 6 weeks care and that throughput is so vital. But equally, we need to make sure that the local authorities and Derek, it'd be good to know about kind of the differences you see in London around the end result, because not everybody is going to be Reable, but there is people that will need long-term care. And I think the national average is about 50%, which is shocking, because to me it should be a higher statistic. But 50% of those people that leave Reablement services actually do need long-term provision. And actually, if you haven't got that, it then backs up, and the system soon backs up, and the hospitals can't discharge and they can't get people in. Derek, what do you see in London around the differences between those local authorities that have a Reablement service per se and ones that don't, but use maybe your traditional home care services for Reablement?
It's a loaded question.
I was going to say that.
On your diplomatic hat.
Name and shame the local authorities.
No, not at all. But you obviously must notice the difference from then. I don't know what you call the people you look after, but your clients, your customers that then come to you, that must have been through other services that have said they've had Reablement compared to kind of the Reablement service that you provide with therapists and having those specialists involved.
Yeah. There's huge differences. It's really interesting because we also did a project on Reablement just outside of London, and we worked with different care agencies. And as great as we are as OTs, when we were doing interventions, a huge aspect of it depended on what the care agencies actually wanted to happen. So we'd work with amazing care agencies who actually did want Reablement to work, and they wanted to right-size packages of care, and they understood the importance of it, because realistically, if you discharge somebody, you'll have somebody else to replace them. It's understanding the throughput. You're never going to run dry if you get it right. Versus the other care agencies who did exactly what you were talking about, Mark, where they want to have the person stay on their books. So yeah, it makes a huge difference what the care agency wants as well. And I have some anecdotal stories. I'm not going to say any boroughs in particular, but boroughs where they do outsource to care agencies, and regardless of how good the care agencies are, when they feed back, nothing happens. And it's not because councils don't want things to happen, it's because they're under-resourced. They don't have the staff to be able to answer that phone or answer that email, particularly when they're thinking, well, this client is safe. I've got a list of 100 people who need to be assessed straight away. I don't have time to be dealing with a care agency who's keeping somebody safe. So it does make a huge difference. And then it impacts on the person's quality of life, because we also talk about how if you don't right-size people's care, that instead of reabling people or enabling people to do the things they want to do, you're actually taking those skills away from them. So another thing that I think is really important about Reablement is how strict the inclusion and exclusion criteria is. And yeah, I understand that we want to have more than 50% of people being discharged without any care. But I'd challenge that and say what we should be doing is taking on the cases that traditional Reablement pathways won't look at. So people who have got chronic degenerative neurological conditions, your MS, Parkinson's, dementia. I even feel that getting somebody out of hospital who had a package of care that was 4 calls a day, double up, you can even look at putting them on Reablement pathways, because you can look at skills that they haven't looked at before. Even small changes can make massive differences to how somebody's quality of life is, and right-sizing that care. And it's not always about saying, well, you've had 4 calls a day double-handed, now we want to get you down to 3 calls a day single-handed. It's about how do we use those hours in a way that enables that person to do as much as they can for themselves. So even if we're just making a small saving of like an hour a day, that's somebody else's care package. So we have to like really strip it back, think about how we're doing the things that we're doing, and understand the impact that we potentially have, not only to increase somebody's quality of life, but actually decrease it if we don't do it right.
No, you touched on a really good point there. Go on, Lynn, sorry.
Just really interestingly, because we do bridging, re-enablement and hospital discharge projects, the only other care I do is complex. So when I go into an area, I work really hard with the providers that I'm going to be transferring the clients over to, because I'm not seen as a threat, because I'm there to do re-enablement and pass that on. And I do my bread and butter, as you put it, is mainly complex paediatric and adult packages. So much more like 2-to-1s, 3-to-1 track evented. So when we do those projects, we're doing those projects for re-enablement. We're not doing it to build a service in the area. We come, we teach, like the Isle of Wight, we taught the lead provider how to do our model, and then we go away. And I did a big flow report for the hospital. So I think there's a real room for people that just do re-enablement, and that's their bread and butter, and they go from project to project, and that's needed, as well as it should happen, but it doesn't happen. We should all work together. So if you know some really good providers in the area and they're not on the books and they've got a block, you can be saying, I identified every provider on the island and who was, rated, who wasn't rated, etc. And said, what about using some of these unrated ones, because they've not been inspected yet. Because they've not been inspected doesn't mean to say they're not good. You could give them some packages, and I think there's a responsibility to work when you're doing re-enablement as part of a bigger picture, to work with the ICBs and to work with the trusts and the local authorities to give them some alternatives when somebody's stuck on, a 6-week re-enablement at week 8 because they can't get another provider and they do need a package ongoing. That needs to be avoided, because there's lots of providers out there would like that work and could do it really well. But I just think there's a whole piece of work to be done around that. I don't know what you think, Derek, but I think there's a massive piece of work. I'm not seen as a threat because I don't do dom care in that area. I'm just doing what I do.
Yeah.
To do flow.
Derek, any viewpoint there?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. But then at the same time, the care over since the pandemic, the way the amount of care agencies that have popped up everywhere. We're based in Hackney, and I think in the last 3 years, about 40 care agencies have came out of nowhere. And then it's this chicken and egg situation where the hospital will be on black alert. The providers that are on the approved providers list don't have capacity, but then the council is scared to give out cases to new providers. It's a really difficult situation. And then also when you're looking at new providers that are coming out, and they could be amazing, but they can't get onto the approved providers list because their finances, they're new. They don't have enough finances to be seen as safe for councils to be able to give them care, because there's a financial responsibility that goes with it as well. They have to ensure that this company is going to be able to hold the care for as long as needed. It's a really difficult situation.
I would agree. There's a lot of agencies starting up. There's also a lot of agencies that will only do private work, which is quite shocking, really.
Well, that's down to the way that the councils are funding.
Yeah.
Every council that I know of will always say you need to pay your staff London Living Wage, but then they don't give you enough money to be able to pay your staff London Living Wage, because you have to look at the overheads. What was the last figure that came out from the Home Care Association? Something like £27 for just general care to be delivered to meet living wage. No council that I know is anywhere close to delivering £27 per hour. So how can you expect small providers to be able to start building up and supporting councils if they can't even get enough money to pay their staff a really basic salary? And realistically, these staff, they are like the backbones of the country who are bolstering up everything. We need to treat them with the respect that they deserve.
No, absolutely. And I think you touched on a point there, and I was going to say, actually, they're preventing people going back into hospital, but they're supporting discharges out of hospital. And actually, without that kind of reablement ethos, actually, it does all back up. We've spoken there on finances. One of the questions I'd written down that popped into my head earlier was around somebody, and we've just spoken about the number of care services popping up. So it might be that there's more thinking about popping up. There might be people watching or listening that think, actually, I'd like to do true reablement and do care properly and reable people. But the finances doesn't allow them to maybe have OTs or specialists within their team. What would be your advice if you've got a traditional kind of home care model? So it's a manager and then the frontline care staff. They don't have any specialists at the moment because they haven't yet kind of got enough income to be able to pay for those physiotherapy, the occupational therapy. What would be your tips and advice around how you upskill your staff enough to deliver some reablement care?
Lynn, you can go first.
So we do nursing apprenticeships and nursing associate courses at our place, and we're NMC approved. I really think that it's a really good way for people to get qualified. Nursing associate doesn't need you to have a practice assessor or an assessor on site. It's all done by the university, and it's a really good way to upskill your staff. It's all paid for now because they've made changes in the levy stuff, and I think it's a really good way to move forward. And everyone assumes when you become a nursing associate, that means you just stay a nursing associate, but it also routes you to things like becoming a paramedic, becoming an OT, becoming a physiotherapist. So I think I think that's one of the things for us. We've also got our psychologist who's working with all our teams on resilience and training around motivating people. But I would say, really, if you are going to do a service like that, you need to consider getting somebody who's clinical on board. If not, get people trained, and in 2 years go into that market. Because if you go into, whenever you're asked why a package has got to go up or down, they will ask for your clinical justification. And that's where a lot of providers struggle, if they haven't got somebody that can give that clinical justification. So I would say, really think about nursing associate qualifications. They're out now. They take in November. Sorry, they take in September. They take in January. It's 1 day a week study, 1 day a week college, and then they're free to work with you for the other 3 days. I think it's a really good model if you want to upskill your team. Other than that, just train. That's all I would say.
Yeah, 100% agree with Lynn. We have staff on apprenticeship programs as well. So apprenticeships, massive push on getting your staff into apprenticeships. So if any of our staff are listening, talk to me if you want to go on an apprenticeship, because we put some on before. And then at the same time, what I would look at is no matter how big or small your company is, every company will have a training budget because it's essential. You need to have it. And you could be smart with how you use that training budget. You don't have to employ an occupational therapist or a physio or a nurse. What you could do is use part of that training budget to have somebody just do ad hoc hours. So you could pay an occupational therapist to come in and do clinical supervision or some training or that kind of thing. And it could just be a way to, as a stepping stone to get you forward in that reablement area. And we've got another occupational therapist who works with us, and she also works for another care agency. She works 4 days a week with us and 1 day a week with another care agency. So it is a model out there that other care agencies are using because they understand the importance of having a clinician, even if it's just on their books for 1 day a week or 1 day a fortnight, because it makes that massive difference.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much. And talking there around kind of the training and bits and pieces, just, I don't know if both of you are aware, we released a newsletter this morning. So the Skills for Care training grant that we are used to is actually disappearing. So the government has launched the new Adult Social Care Training and Development Fund on behalf of the Department of Health and Social Care. So I'm going to share a link in the comments because there's a lot of new training that is available on that grant compared to what was available on the WDF funding. But definitely something to keep a close eye on there around training. And I think we also have to remember that training isn't governed by the CQC. I think we've got the best practice guides by Skills for Care of what you should be delivering, but actually there is no set official training for our staff. So it might be that there are so many providers out there saying that you train health and safety every year and nothing changes. Actually, how you can maybe not put your staff on such expensive health and safety training, you do something as a refresher that meets that threshold, but actually you invest your money into some other training. Maybe you get an OT or a therapist, to come into your service to deliver. But I definitely agree with what you're both saying. Without that person being within your core team for however many days a week, whatever that FTE, actually you do need them there. But I do believe that based on my experience of having therapists within my team, is the upskilling that they can give to the staff as well. And that confidence of kind of, I think when you're a frontline care worker, you don't necessarily have the confidence if somebody says no, whereas I think the therapists have a bit more oomph about them to Derek, and you are one, so I'm sure you can elaborate more than what I mean around getting people up and motivated more than maybe a care worker might. So.
I've got plenty of oomph.
I think because as care worker, and I've been a care worker, you're trained that it's always the person's choice. So if they say they don't want to get up and they don't want to do it, then that's their choice. Whereas I think obviously from an OT's point of view, obviously you must be trained very differently because there's a different approach to kind of approaching people that might not necessarily be engaged.
It's really important when we're talking about training, and you touched on it, the exact point. So let's look at something that's very common on reablement pathways, people who are coming out who've had a stroke. So if we look at stroke survivor rates for the last 15 years, it's increased by roughly about 4%. Roughly about 100,000 people will have a stroke every year. So if the survival rate has increased by 4%, you're looking at an additional 4,000 people coming out of hospital who previously wouldn't have survived. And those people are going on to discharge to assess pathways, right sizing package of care pathways, reablement, enablement pathways. Now let's look at the difference between training 15 years ago for a carer versus now. Nothing really has changed. There's no qualification for it. Doing the carer or the carer cert, which you can do online, moving and handling online, the practical skills aren't being disseminated out, and it's not being enforced to be disseminated out. So if you're looking at a cohort of people coming out who have dense hemiplegias or expressive problems or receptive problems, and we're not giving the staff the training that they need that's essential to work with this client group, what changes are we expecting to happen? How are we expecting people to have single-handed care pathways put in if we're not giving the care agencies the time, dedication, and training that is essential for them to be able to do this? A lot of times when I've done reablement projects before starting this company, and a huge reason why I started this company, is you'd work with the carers who would be fantastic, and then they'd be taken off that client, put on another client, and new carers brought in, and then we're told by brokerage that the care agency has asked for it to be increased again because they don't have the skills to be able to work with this piece of equipment, or this client has got behavioral issues, or small things like that that make huge differences.
I was going to say as well, not all training has to cost something. All my staff have just done the Autistic Society training, which is free. There are hospices which give out training free. NIPI training is often free. Pump training is often free. Hospitals will supply it. So I would get in touch with all your local care associations, join them, and get as much free training as you can.
And reps, get company reps out as well. Get the
reps in. And
literally, the best training that you're going to get is getting a rep out. we have like a Cora bed in the office, and we've had a Cora out here a couple of times. We've got a Seating Matters chair in the office. We've had a Seating Matters come out because they know their equipment way better than any OT, way better than any care worker. So if you're going to get hints, tips, and tricks on how to use this piece of equipment, get the reps out. They bloody make it. They're going to know how to use it way better than I can.
They want to sell it as well. So exactly. I would say, so we belong to a couple of like home care associations in areas. Hertfordshire's just one I'm going to mention because they've got a fantastic care training, Hearts Care Providers Association there. They offer loads of free training. They let you advertise jobs there. They offer all sorts of support. They've got a training academy there. For a smaller provider, I would say belonging to something like that, although it might be a £500 or £600 spend, will save you a fortune. Absolutely save you a fortune. They run multiple courses, and if you're a member, they're free for your staff. So it might be a bit of an outlay, but it's definitely worth it. Things like nutrition, oral care, all of those things. And the other thing you could do is you could make people in your company champions. Yeah, so they go and find out, they go out and find areas of care, but they're really interested, like dementia champion. They go on the course, they do the dementia champion course, then they come back and they train everybody. They keep everybody updated. We do a Teach Friday, time to teach on a Friday. We do a session with all the champions every Friday, and they all do updates for everybody. Everyone loves it. It's only half hour.
Yeah, short and sweet, and nobody wants to be sat on training all day on one subject. No. It's just laborious. But I think you both touch on really good points there around using a rep, but using a care association. But I also think local authorities. So I will give a shout out to Essex because their local authority, they have a care provider hub. There is so much free training on that hub that even my company, I'm always forever putting my managers and my staff on it because actually it's free, but actually the training is really good. But a lot of it, they're outsourcing from training departments that you would necessarily be buying from anyway. And I think it's worth checking in with your care associations because there are some that charge. Essex, it's been free for the last couple of years. Havering, Barking and Dagenham, it's minimal charge, but actually both of them give access to a training provider. So for care providers choice, which there'll be people in London there, actually you get access to Grey Matter Group as part of that membership. Actually, that's then free for all of your staff, regardless of how many people you've got. So it's definitely worth considering associations and kind of what some of those benefits are and speaking to them because they don't necessarily advertise it on their website. It's just a member's known thing. Sorry, Derek, you were going to come in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm sure we've all heard about these new legislations that are coming in through the MHRA around bed leavers and bed equipment. Care agencies go to your local provider, go to your local council and say, we need training on this. This is new legislation. You're the experts in the field. Give us training on it. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be using it. So they need to know what are the restrictions on this? How is it a deprivation of liberty? What can actually be put in? What can't be put in? Why can't it be put in?
There's also some really good materials, as we all know, on Skills for Care for everybody
and Skills for Health as well.
And Skills for Care and Skills for Health. Some really good stuff there as well. So it's not all about spending money, but I think trying to get a clinician and perhaps putting some people on. Yeah. If you're an agency owner, why not become a nursing associate or become a nurse yourself?
Another thing that I've tried to do here in Hackney, but it's been a bit of a flop, but I definitely think it's a great idea. If you're in a local authority and you join the providers forum, try and network with the other providers so you have a bigger purchasing power. You can get together and you can say, there's this course that's £1,000, but if we have like 20 delegates, if we all send 2 each, it's going to be practically nothing for us. All we'll have to do is really pay for the staff to be there for that day. So we should stop seeing each other as competition and start to have a more cooperative approach, working together, skill share, look at what we can offer each other, rather than thinking, oh, I don't want them to be any good.
I work with 3 providers and we share big costs for certain trainings. So you're very welcome to come and join us, Derek, if you want to. We've got an office in Shoreditch.
It's all around. That is, but you are right. It's all around collaboration. I think the days of us seeing each other as competitors seemed to disappear during the pandemic. I think it was one real positive that came out of COVID is that kind of that collaboration, that joined up working. But you're definitely right that we can utilize each other even better, and that shared cost and equal footing is definitely something. Adam,
I was going to say, if anybody on here is thinking about doing re-enablement, as I said to you, Mark, I've got almost like a mobilisation plan that I'm happy to share that tells you each step you have to do. I'll show it to Derek first to see if he can add anything to it. But if anyone's thinking about it, I'm happy to share it.
Yeah, no, that'd be really good if you're happy to, and we can pop it up on the website. I promised Adam that I wouldn't talk about AI anymore, but he's obviously not here tonight. So one question I wrote down to discuss tonight is around the future of reablement and what that might look like. And obviously, I think AI will probably play a part in that, and robotics. Have you seen anything on the radar through any of maybe the conferences, the care shows? Have you seen anything from this country, abroad? What are your thoughts on kind of what the future of reablement might possibly look like?
So there is something called pain check. Has anyone seen that yet? It looks at people's faces. I've not seen it in action.
I've read about it.
And seeing if they're in pain. So I actually had my IT team in today, and we're going to look at doing some AI in care recording, because just where they speak it in rather than type it in, so we could get a little bit more detailed and more personalised. I'll let you know how that goes, but pain check seems to be really good, and my friend Zoe's used it and is really impressed by it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I've seen a number of people talk about it. It does look very good. Derek, have you seen anything?
If you want to see the future of AI in care, just go over to Japan. They're like 10 years ahead of us when it comes to things like that. So I've heard about how they're inserting stretch receptors into people's bladders. So it learns when they need to go to the toilet, and it'll alert people just before. So if they've got continence issues, AI is learning about how and when they need to go to the toilet, reducing moisture lesions, reducing continence care issues. That's a huge factor, a huge spend in the NHS. I also had a interesting meeting with a university professor who goes through Oxford but is based in Japan, and they're talking about robotics in care in the future. And it's definitely, in the next 10 years, we will definitely be seeing robots in care without a shadow of a doubt. I think it's going to be a luxury to have a person coming out to look at you in the future.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think I do look over at Japan. I think we met, Adam and I met with a couple of people that kind of work between England and Japan, and some of the things that are now coming out off the back of that around kind of the hygiene and the infection control and bits and pieces. It's obviously not as smooth sailing as we kind of see on the internet, but I definitely agree with you, Derek, that I think there's going to be a lot more robotics in care.
If Adam's not interested, you and me, Mark, will pop over to Japan and see what's happening.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely love it.
Sadly, got a lot of stuff going on. Sadly, going on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awful lot going on over there. So
somebody's put in the comments, don't mention AI to Elon Musk. He'll make a butt before any thought of care. I fully agree. Obviously, the tech that we do have, I'm conscious we've only got 10 minutes left, and then I'll let you go so you can spend some time with your families. Telecare, how much does that play a role in reablement care? So we've got telecare and telehealth. What are your views on that?
Totally underutilized. We need to invest way more into it completely. It's so much. It's nothing but opportunity. There's so much that it can do to support our service users, way more than we're actually investing in. Like there's cases that I have here in Hackney where if we had the appropriate telehealth, we could look at reducing and right-sizing packages, but it's about getting that initial investment, and that's a really difficult thing to do.
I think there's lots of advantages to both of them, but I also don't understand why they don't make almost like chat rooms, so people that are lonely could speak to each other about conditions and stuff like that as a side product, as a side thing, because I think a lot of conditions are increased by loneliness.
Oh yeah, definitely. Social integration is
I think we're seeing a lot
hugely
more.
important.
Yeah, and I think we are seeing a lot more of that move into the market. I know we've got Sentai that do that, so around Alexa devices that can help prevent loneliness. And I know that Sierra Care quite often read about how they've got an AI package where actually their customers are able to speak to the devices and it gets to know them and trends and analysis, but also feedback any concerns back to the office. So I think we're definitely starting to see that side of it be used a lot more.
Totally underutilized, in my opinion. We definitely need to put more emphasis on it. Even really small things like what you're talking about with Sarah Care, where they're monitoring things like blood pressure, oxygen saturation levels, temperature, ECG, feeding it into an AI algorithm and picking up infections before people even know that they've got infections, stopping hospital discharges. I mean, if we did that across the board for every provider in England or the UK, how many hospital admissions would that prevent? It'd be like massive amounts of money.
It's almost standard in complex care, though. OBS and all of those things are standard, and we'll know if someone's, declining quite quickly by their readings. So we know the signs. So yeah,
but you've got
absolutely.
nurses and nurse associates reading it. If you've got something
got carers
attached to
reading
AI.
them. Yeah, we have got carers reading it as well. But I agree with you. If you could put that out there and people could put the information in and AI gave the feedback to the care agencies, how amazing would that be?
Completely.
There was a big push of it pre-COVID around the blue box, which was by WASM, and that seemed to be rolling out at a kind of a national level. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and I haven't really heard as much about it as obviously that was happening before, which I think is a real shame, because I think there's definitely benefit, and it's that joined up working with healthcare and feeding it straight back to GP records, and obviously with the integration of AI into that, actually preventing those hospital admissions and getting people treated a lot sooner than kind of we might be at the moment, with obviously lack of awareness, lack of training, and people kind of being admitted to hospital a lot further on than they probably need to be.
Yeah.
Is there anything reablement that we haven't spoken about tonight that you think anybody listening, watching should know about? Derek, I'll come to you.
Anything reablement that we haven't touched on? I'm drawing a blank. We've touched on a lot. We've talked about AI. We've talked about therapy at the front line. We've talked about upskilling. I talked about inclusion exclusion criteria and how that needs to be changed. We've talked about how commissioning needs to have more clinical focus so that we can devise pathways that are suitable for our client groups. What else have we missed out on? We've not really talked about the importance of having speech and language in it as well, because that communication, swallowing, like we did a reablement project here in Hackney with the Harmerton University Hospital, and one of the things that really stuck out to me is having access to speech and language. It made huge differences, because we'd have care partners noticing that people were having difficulty with medication. They stopped taking their medication. And when we looked into it, it was because they really struggled with the swallow aspect of it. So having a speech and language therapist on hand, not having to go through another pathway added onto a waiting list, which could have been weeks down the line where this person wouldn't have been taking medication, heart problems, ending up back in hospital. But having access to that, huge advantage, and having access to it now through a community pathway. We've got clients with speech problems, receptive and expressive. So having access to a professional who knows how to incorporate speech and communication into daily care plans, massive advantage.
That's really interesting. Lynn, anything from you?
Yeah, two things. Communication, making sure you've got easy read information for people. They're really clear about what the service is there for. and what the aims of the service are for. And also, just for anyone out there thinking about doing it, it's a great, great project. Seeing people, develop and re-enable, whether they're staying with you or going long term or whatever happens, the difference you can make in those 6 weeks after discharge from hospital are probably some of the biggest difference you'll ever see for that client. So I think if it's done right, it's an amazing project to do. So don't shy away from it. If you think it's something you want to do, I would definitely encourage you to make the roads into it.
No, absolutely. And I know when I speak to a number of my care workers, what they'll say is you actually see somebody at their worst, but actually when they're leaving our service, kind of up to 6 weeks later, actually a completely different person with their independence and their life back, and the feedback from the people that we support actually of how it's just transformed them and never thought they might be able to walk again or get back out of bed. And it is life changing. And I think we don't necessarily hear about the positives of reablement much in the media. I mean, we don't see much positive of social care in the media in general, but we definitely don't see much around kind of reablement and that kind of ethos and focus there. One thing we did touch on that I just wanted to talk about very quickly around anybody thinking of reablement was around the reviews, which you touched on kind of right at the beginning, Lynn, and it's still on my post-it note here, is how important are those reviews and how often, in your opinion, should they be happening?
We do day 3, 5 and 7 and then every week. I think they're absolutely critical. I think, how can you really work out where somebody is unless somebody goes in independently? Because if you're working with someone every day, those little improvements don't seem so big because you're seeing it happen. Whereas if you're coming in just to review that and somebody's, got dressed by themselves, but then they're being assisted, that's a big thing, and how did that go? And that, I think that's absolutely essential. I don't know about you, Derek, but I think it's essential to have that pair of eyes to come and review the needs at those points.
Oh, completely agree. So we talked about care plans earlier. So we talk about how we see our care plans as living documents. It's not a case of you've got a care plan and then we're going to review it in 6 weeks. It's a case of anytime anything new happens, we have to be alerted about it and we have to update our care plan based on new information. So when we're doing training on reablement pathways, our training in general for new clients, new staff who are working with us, we talk about the Borg perceived exertion scale. And we're saying about how if things get harder for you, then you have to let us know, because it's either one of 3 things is going wrong. 1, the training that we've given you to work with that person as an individual isn't right, and we need to relook at that. 2, the equipment that we've provided or that the hospital have provided is wrong, and we need to look at that. Or 3, and probably what I think is the most important, is the person that you're working with, your patient, client, service user, customer, whatever you want to call them, they aren't engaging, or you're not giving them the opportunity to engage enough. You're taking skills away from them rather than giving them skills. So we tell everybody about the Borg perceived exertion scale. We get them to check off where they feel they are at and then communicate back to us. And that gives us more information on how the service user, customer, client is actually doing. Are they thriving or are they just surviving?
No, absolutely. I think that's a great tip. I'm going to message you afterwards for the name of it so I can share it.
Oh, it's just like a scale 1 to 10, like one of those happiness scales. You can pull it off the internet, anything.
Okay.
I think for me, it's around the reviewing in the background, behind the scenes of those reviews. And I think looking at plan versus actual time that your carers are in there, because I think a lot of the time with reablement, it's not about being in there for the full length of the visit. It's around actually being in there for the time that person needs. And we spoke very early on in the show about actually need to flex up and down in terms of visit time, because actually there will be times when people aren't having a good day and they need longer, but actually you're supporting them to do that independently. But there will be times that they are having a good day and actually your care worker might turn up and the person's up dressed and they might not even be at home because they're already out the door and doing whatever they're doing for the day, which is perfect. And that's what we all want. And I think it's around reviewing care notes and the importance. And it'll be really interesting, Lynn, around your AI project around note taking, because I think there is so much vitalness in checking what care workers are saying that the person's done for themselves versus what they've had to do to support them. And then obviously that all feeds back into those reviews. But I think you're both right that that review element is almost as important as getting that care plan and those goals set with the person.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. I want to thank you both for giving up your evenings time to talk about Reablement. We've been doing the Caring View for 3 years, and it's a conversation that's been on my ever-growing list of one to have. And yeah, I'm always told I should have it a lot more, especially as I work in Reablement. But I think it's been a really, really interesting conversation. If there's anybody that wants to know more around Reablement, where can they find you both? Lynn, I'll come to you first this time.
They can email me on lynn@carefirst24.co.uk, and I'm quite happy to answer any questions. Or I will be at the care show wandering about. I'm not speaking this year, I'm just wandering about, so I'll probably be there. But also I'm happy to meet with anybody, give anybody any support in terms of re-enablement if they'd like to just see how it works, really.
Thank you very much. And obviously keep an eye out, because Lynn's going to be sharing a hot document once Derek's had his eyes over it. Derek.
I need Derek to check it.
Derek, where can people find you if they want to contact you for more?
Yeah, just screen grab this and you can get my name, and then you can look me up on LinkedIn. Do screen grab it because Slater is spelled Sleater. Or you can just go onto our website, sundaycaretherapy.com, and then there's chat function, or you can send us an email through that. Happy to discuss anything care related. And then a shameless plug, I'm going to be presenting at the Alzheimer's care show this year, both days, on the Friday and the Saturday. So one on social integration and the importance of social integration in the later stages of dementia, and then one on eating and drinking, because we need to make sure that our loved ones are actually eating and drinking, what to do when they stop engaging with food. Shameless plugs.
No shame in it. Plug away. I'll find the links and I'll share them into the comments.
I'm on LinkedIn as well if anybody needs me. So I didn't think that.
If you can't find Derek and Lynn and you want to get in contact, please do just reach out to the Caring View or to me directly, and I can signpost you there. Lynn, Derek, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for our sponsors. So they are CBAT, they are Attis Care, they're Prosper Well, and Care Show London. So Care Show London is next week, so do make sure you head over to their website to get your tickets if you do want to go. You might see Lynn walking around. Thank you very much, both of you. Have a good evening.
Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye.